The hidden truth. Sophie sat at her small kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea growing cold in her hands. She couldn't shake the words her parents had said last week. "You'll need to start paying us for the apartment, Sophie," her mother had declared, her tone businesslike. "We've let you stay for free long enough." The statement had caught Sophie off guard. The apartment, after all, wasn't something she had borrowed. It had been a gift. Or so she thought. Her father had nodded in agreement, explaining, "We're retired now. We can't afford to maintain it without your help." Sophie had reluctantly agreed. But something didn't sit right. This apartment wasn't just a random place to her. It had been a family treasure, left to her by her grandmother when she passed. Or at least, that was what Sophie had been told her entire life. That evening, unable to sleep, Sophie found herself rummaging through an old box of documents that her grandmother had once given her. Among faded photos and handwritten recipes, she stumbled upon a yellowed envelope labelled Deed and Transfer of Ownership. Her heart raced as she pulled out the document. It was official, stamped and signed, and it clearly named Sophie as the rightful owner of the apartment. The date? 2 years before her grandmother passed. Sophie's mind spun. Why hadn't her parents mentioned this? Why were they asking her for rent when legally the apartment was hers? The next morning, Sophie confronted her parents. Sitting across from them, she placed the document on the table. "Care to explain this?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and anger. Her mother's face turned pale, but her father's expression hardened. "We didn't think you'd understand," he said gruffly. "Your grandmother may have left it to you, but we've managed it all these years. We deserved something in return. You're asking me to pay rent for something that already belongs to me?" Sophie's voice rose. "How could you hide this from me?" Her mother reached out, her voice softening. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Sophie. We needed the money." Sophie sat back, staring at them. She felt a mix of betrayal and pity. "Things are going to change," she said firmly. "We'll talk about what you need, but I'm not paying rent for my own apartment, and from now on, we're going to be honest with each other." Her parents looked at each other, then nodded. For the first time in years, Sophie felt like she was finally standing her ground. Sophie left her parents' house that afternoon, clutching the deed tightly in her hand. Her emotions were a tangled mess. Betrayal, anger, and a faint, lingering sadness. She had always trusted her parents, and this revelation shook her deeply. Back in her apartment, she sat down at her desk, staring at the document. She had proven her point, but what now? The trust between her and her parents felt fractured, and she wasn't sure if it could be repaired. The following week, her parents called, asking to meet again. Sophie hesitated, but she agreed, hoping that time had given them all a chance to cool down. This time, the conversation was different. Her mother spoke first, her voice trembling. "We're sorry, Sophie. We shouldn't have hidden this from you. We let our financial troubles cloud our judgment." Her father nodded, though he looked reluctant. "We didn't think we had any other options, but it wasn't right, and we understand that now." Sophie listened, her heart softening slightly. "I understand that times are hard," she replied, "and I want to help if I can, but it has to be on my terms, and we need to rebuild trust." Her parents exchanged a look. Her mother reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. Inside were more papers, old bills, financial records, and even a letter from a bank threatening foreclosure on their house. "We're in trouble, Sophie," her mother admitted. "We were too proud to tell you, that's why we asked for rent, but we see now that we should have been honest." Sophie's anger gave way to concern. "Why didn't you come to me sooner? I could have helped you before it came to this." Her father sighed. "We didn't want you to think we couldn't handle things. Parents are supposed to take care of their children, not the other way around." Sophie looked at them, a lump forming in her throat. "We're family," she said softly. "We take care of each other. Let's figure this out together." Over the next few weeks, Sophie worked with her parents to sort through their finances. She helped them renegotiate debts, sell unnecessary belongings, and even found a way to rent out a small part of their home for extra income. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship slowly began to heal. The resentment faded, replaced by a deeper understanding of one another. One evening, as they shared a modest dinner in her parents' now less cluttered home, her father raised a toast. "To Sophie," he said, his voice warm, "for standing up for herself. And for us." Her mother smiled, wiping a tear from her eye. Sophie felt a warmth she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step towards something better. A family built on honesty and mutual respect. As time passed, Sophie found herself reflecting on how much things had changed. The experience had forced her to grow in ways she hadn't expected. She'd always been the quiet, agreeable one in her family, never one to challenge or question her parents, but now she'd discovered her own strength and how vital honesty was in any relationship, even within a family. Her parents had changed too. They began including Sophie in decisions, no longer hiding their struggles out of pride or fear of judgment. They started listening to her advice and even asked for her help navigating things they didn't understand, like managing their budget or setting up online payments. It wasn't just about finances anymore, it was about trust. One Saturday, while Sophie was cleaning out her closet, she stumbled upon a photo album she hadn't opened in years. As she flipped through the pages, she saw a picture of herself as a child, sitting on her grandmother's lap in the very apartment she now called home. Her grandmother's kind eyes and warm smile seemed to radiate from the photo, reminding Sophie of the love and care that had always been at the heart of their family. Inspired, Sophie decided to honor her grandmother's memory by turning the apartment into something more than just a living space. She wanted it to be a place that brought her family together, a reminder of their shared history and the lessons they'd learned. She spent the next few months redecorating, incorporating pieces of her grandmother's old furniture and hanging family photos on the walls. She invited her parents over for dinners, game nights, and even movie marathons. At first, it felt a little awkward, like they were trying too hard. But gradually, it started to feel natural. One evening, as they all sat around the dining table laughing over a story her father was telling, Sophie realized how far they'd come. The apartment was no longer a source of tension, but a symbol of their resilience and connection. A mother noticed Sophie smiling and asked, "What are you thinking about?" Sophie shook her head with a soft laugh. "Just how lucky I am to have this place, and to have you both in my life, even if you drive me crazy sometimes," her father chuckled, raising his glass. "To family," he said. "Flawed, complicated, but always worth fighting for." Sophie clinked her glass against theirs, a warm feeling settling in her chest. She knew they weren't perfect, and they still had challenges to face, but for the first time in a long time, she felt certain they would face them together. Months turned into years, and Sophie's apartment became a true centerpiece for her family. What started as a simple effort to mend broken trust evolved into a tradition of togetherness. Her parents visited regularly, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. The apartment became the setting for countless celebrations. Birthdays, holidays, and even small impromptu dinners filled with laughter and stories. Sophie herself had changed in more ways than one. She'd grown confident not only in her relationships, but also in her professional life. Standing her ground with her parents had taught her the value of advocating for herself, and it spilled over into her career. She earned a promotion at work not because she waited to be recognized, but because she'd learned to ask for what she deserved. One winter evening, as the first snow of the season blanketed the city, Sophie sat in her living room, wrapped in a soft blanket. Her parents were due to arrive any minute for their weekly dinner, and the apartment smelled of the hearty stew she'd been simmering all afternoon. She looked around at the space, now filled with warmth and character, an eclectic mix of her grandmother's vintage charm and her own modern touches. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was her mum. "We're on our way, bringing dessert." A smile spread across Sophie's face. Life wasn't perfect, but it was full of growth, love, and the hard-earned closeness that only comes from facing challenges together. That night, as her parents arrived and they settled around the table, her father pulled out a small envelope. "This is for you," he said, sliding it across to Sophie. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up and carefully opening it. Inside was a handwritten note in her grandmother's familiar cursive. "My dearest Sophie," it read, "this apartment is more than just a place to live. It's a foundation for your dreams, a haven for your heart, and a home for our family. Take care of it, and let it take care of you. Love always, Grandma." Sophie felt tears prick her eyes as she looked up at her parents. Her mother smiled gently. "We found it while sorting through some old boxes. We thought you should have it." Sophie clutched the note to her chest, her voice soft. "Thank you. This means so much to me." Her father raised his glass. "To Grandma," he said, his voice a little shaky. "And to Sophie, for keeping her legacy alive." They clinked glasses, and Sophie felt a profound sense of peace. Her grandmother's wish had come true. The apartment wasn't just hers, it belonged to all of them, a testament to their journey and the love that bound them together. And as the snow continued to fall outside, Sophie realized that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. That evening, as the laughter of her parents echoed through the apartment, Sophie felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They stayed late into the night, sharing memories and dreams for the future, the kind of conversation that had once felt impossible amidst the tension and misunderstandings. When they finally left, Sophie stood by the window, watching the snowflakes dance under the streetlights. Her grandmother's note rested on the coffee table, a tangible reminder of the love and wisdom that had guided her family, even through its most difficult times. She thought about everything they had endured together, the arguments, the revelations, the healing. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Her family wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that made it all the more precious. Sophie turned off the lights and walked to her bedroom, feeling the comforting embrace of the apartment she now truly called home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, as life always did. But for tonight, she felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for her grandmother's gift, for her parents' willingness to change, and for her own courage to fight for what truly mattered. As she drifted off to sleep, a single thought lingered in her mind. Love, honesty, and understanding weren't just the foundations of a family. They were the key to keeping it strong.